Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on budget management, aligning with your marketing and enrollment goals. This webinar is hosted by MindMax, your partner to increased enrollments through unbundled technology-enabled marketing and enrollment services. On behalf of the MindMax team, I would like to warmly welcome you. This is our agenda for about the next 45 minutes. I will be reviewing logistics and introduce our presenters, and then we'll dive into the conversation with Lee and Chris. Our agenda for today is business models, the enrollment funnel, budgeting and costing factors, specifically how brand affects costing, how programming affects costing, and the costing construct. Then we'll move on to 3 examples of different programs, being non-credit certificate, media plan, and lastly, we will finish up with guiding principles for budgeting alignment. At the close of the webinar, we will open the discussion to our attendees here for a live 15-minute Q&A session with our presenters. Throughout the webinar, you can submit questions via the questions button in your GoToWebinar console panel. We will address those questions during the Q&A. We also will be doing several polls during the presentation, and we would love for you to participate. Now, I would like to introduce you today to our presenters, starting with Lee Maxey, the CEO of MindMax, and Chris Aldrich, Marketing Manager as well at MindMax. I will now turn it over to Lee to start us off.
Welcome, everyone, and we're here to talk about how marketing budgets should support your business model and how to ensure that that happens. Different business models require different approaches to budgeting, and so we'll start off by taking a look at some of the different business models that people might be using in their units or their universities. So first is a self-supporting model. Many of the extension schools, for instance, in the University of California and the CSU system, are self-supporting, meaning the unit is funded by revenue that the unit generates themselves. They don't take monies from the university, or they don't take monies from the state if it's a public institution. Therefore, the more revenue generated, potentially the more funding is available, and that's specifically unique to a self-supporting model. Second is an IBB or RCM model, which is really a combination of a tax, like a cost-centered model, where different colleges or units within the university are taxed, and then the monies go towards a variety of services, one of them being an extension unit or a continuing ed unit or a school of professional studies. And then that tax is sometimes just part of that unit's funding. They also potentially get some monies from revenue that they generate as well. And then the third is a cost center, which is a fixed line item budget, which is annually, whether it's July 1st to June 30th or however the fiscal is set up, but it's generally a fixed amount. And the goal there is to spend, obviously, within the budget that's been allocated for that cost center. And then lastly, another example would be a separate college, which could be a combination of an IBB model, for instance, but the big factor here is it includes a variety of decision maker stakeholders, which could include things like faculty senate, provost office as well. And so it could be a self-supporting unit. It could be a combined model like an IBB RCM model. So if you can go to the next slide, where we can take a look at the impact of that business model in relationship to marketing. So the self-supporting models can be much more entrepreneurial. Budgets are often driven by goals and forecasts and surpluses or monies that carry over from a previous year. This unit can invest more if there's a return. The challenge is often around a time horizon because of annual fiscals and whether there's a potential return. And so sometimes they're limited by how many funds they have available. However, as I mentioned, that can be made up for with a surplus that can be gone into from an investment standpoint for certain programs on a launch basis and things like that. The IBB RCM model, the challenge here is the internal stakeholders or customer requirements can definitely exceed budget resources. So you can have a demanding internal college, say the College of Business or Arts and Sciences is wanting services that are more expensive than your current funding model, and they may not understand or appreciate that you don't have the budget to be able to do all of the things that they'd like to do. The accurate expectation setting is also a real challenge. For many people, marketing is easy because they've seen ads on TV and those ads seem to work, and therefore, why can't I just publish something and make a course available or program available and lots of people will come? It doesn't work like that, as any of you in marketing know, and it's getting more and more competitive and more challenging to be heard and to be seen in a digital marketplace. And lastly, the flexibility of the budget is often rear view facing. So, and that means that it can lag, the budget can lag potential need for doing things going forward. Third is the cost center. And here you're trying to work within a specific fixed budget. So prioritization is absolutely critical. Prioritization is important in all models, but here it is particularly critical because you have a very limited resource. And it's important to be disciplined to marketing plans. When something's not working, either be sure that you can figure out what's not working or stop doing it. And these budgets are rarely aligned to need, especially when you're looking at growing something or trying a new opportunity. Separate colleges, the applications of resources often do lag. And as I mentioned, the many stakeholders getting a consensus decision to go forward can be challenging or delayed because of the many stakeholders that are involved. So let's take a poll. What business model do you align with, or does your unit align with most closely? So please select either self-supporting, IBB RCM, cost center, separate college, or other. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at our results. Any luck there? There we go. So half of you self-supporting, a couple separate colleges, some cost centers, and some people with an IBB RCM model. Okay, so with that, we'll take a look at the marketing has a lot to do with math, and this is one of my favorite principles. And if that's true, why is it so difficult to connect marketing spend to enrollments? And really, what are the things we can do to increase that predictability from budgeting to results? So we're going to take a look at something we call an enrollment calculator, and Chris is going to talk about that in a few minutes. But this enrollment calculator, we're going to show you a basic version of that, and then talk about how that can be used in a much more sophisticated fashion to get better and better predictability around alignment of marketing budgets to enrollment results. So to start with, let's take a look at the enrollment funnel. This is a core concept. This funnel pictured here is a generic funnel. You can use a much more detailed funnel once you know the different stages of the enrollment process. In this case, this is looking at an enrollment funnel for a credit-bearing or degree-granting program. If you have a non-credit program, you might take out the application stage of the funnel. If you have an international program, you might be adding a whole variety of sub-stages related to getting people's visas and demonstrating fiscal capability and so forth. And so really the goal is to get a funnel that accurately reflects the journey that someone takes as a prospective student, and then start to get specifics around conversion rates from each stage of the funnel to the next stage. And the three levers that we look at for enrollment intelligence is one, obviously revenue. Two is to try and get an accurate or most effective cost of acquisition. And then three is speed of conversion through the funnel. So I will turn it over to Chris.
Thanks, Lee. Hello, everyone. This slide here is going to introduce you to what we call our enrollment calculator, or enrollment funnel calculator. And this is really a tool that I would consider to be a foundational piece for any work that we do on behalf of our clients when we're thinking about building out their marketing budget or a marketing campaign plan, and thinking about how can we most efficiently distribute dollars on behalf of our clients into market in order to meet their enrollment goals. And it's a tool that, and this example that you can see here is incredibly basic. It mimics the enrollment funnel that we're all probably familiar with, but it has some specific outputs that are, I feel like, very important for any marketing budget or marketing campaign planning. In this example, as we look at it, it's looking at really what I would define as the three key metrics, so the three key funnel metrics that lead up to your prospective student enrollment. And that is web traffic, your lead volume, and your application volume. Really how this would be utilized for, you would utilize this in your planning and your budgeting would be, this has four what I would consider inputs. Number one is the enrollment goal. All of our planning needs to start with a goal, and at the end of the day, of course, our job here is to get students enrolled in a program or at an institution. So we always start with inputting of an enrollment goal, and from there build in these three key metrics on the right-hand side of the page here that we see, which are our conversion rates. And this is telling us how are our prospective students moving from the funnel, from website visit through to actually becoming a lead, raising their hand and saying I'm interested in, to eventually becoming an applicant, and then obviously through to enrollment. So this tool would work as, again, with these four inputs, starting number one with your enrollment goal, and starting with these three other inputs of website user conversion rate. So what percentage of students or prospective students who get to your site are converting and becoming a lead? Of those prospective students who then become a lead, what percentage of them are matriculating on and actually filling out an application or completing an application? And what percentage of those applicants are eventually becoming enrollments and enrolling in your program or your institution? So the outputs that you would see there then are these three top funnel metrics, the 24,000, the 720, and the 72. We would utilize these stats then to, number one, do a comparison of actuals, take a deep dive on, based on what we're seeing here and based on this enrollment goal, is the institution or is this program, in range of where it wants to be? Is it efficiently marketing itself? Are we driving the type of traffic we want to be seeing? Are we driving the type of lead volume we're seeing? Is the application volume where we want to see it as well? Or are we potentially performing better in some areas of the funnels than others? Or do we have work to do across the board? I also find this to be a really, really helpful tool for marketers as well, to really visualize how each funnel metric and the conversions throughout the funnel influence each other. So, for example, by playing with these conversion rates on the right side, you can see how we can potentially create efficiencies in how we're marketing these programs. An example would be, for instance, a 1% conversion increase from lead to application could result in, potentially a lot less traffic that you need to drive. So you can think about ways to more efficiently then distribute your marketing budget in order to, again, at the end of the day, ultimately hit your enrollment goals. So this next slide here just takes a deeper dive on that. Again, the first example we showed was probably the most basic example we could of those really main web metrics and lead conversion metrics that we would potentially consider looking at when building out a marketing plan or building out a marketing budget. And really what I want to point out here is that there are a myriad of other metrics and other things that we take into account that provide variability throughout that funnel. The top line is, enrollment variabilities that are unique to your institution, whether it be your institutional brand, it be the type of program or marketing, popularity, et cetera. And Lee's going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But when it comes to specific enrollment funnel metrics, there's also, again, a great deal of other pieces that we're looking at outside of the basic, web traffic, lead volume, application volume, that have a great deal of influence on again, how prospective students are moving through the funnel. So a couple of examples would be, for instance, marketing qualified leads. What percentage of your total lead volumes are becoming, what you considered a qualified or high volume or high quality lead. App completion rate, what percentage of your students who actually start an application are completing them. And then ghost applicants too, which I know is a term in higher ed that we love to throw around, ghost applicants or stealth applicants, but what percentage of your applicant pool, as far as we know, are their quote unquote first touch being the application, and how can that influence your metrics as far as your conversion rates and your funnel goes?
So one of the things we want to look at is the impact of brand. Brand makes a big difference to cost of acquisition. A stronger brand or a more recognized brand is likely to have a lower cost of acquisition because organic search is going to work a lot better. People are searching directly for programs from that brand. Additionally, more popular programs have more competition. And so the cost to get access to terms in a digital standpoint is going to raise the price of each term related to that program. And small niche programs can also be difficult depending on the type of program. And I have on this slide a higher cost of acquisition. There are some cases where it can be a lower cost of acquisition, but in most cases, when you're searching a large population for a few specific kinds of students, it's going to be more expensive. The times when it becomes less expensive is if they're very clearly identified and they might, for instance, have a public record. One example might be if you had an educational program specifically for principals of public schools. That would be a very niche population that would be easily identified and probably part of the public record, and you could target your marketing specifically to that population and therefore potentially have a lower cost of acquisition. But most niche programs generally have a higher cost of acquisition. And then this fourth bullet is one of my very favorites, which is everyone, no matter how strong the brand, it can be the most elite brand, the strongest brand in the world, it still has a bullseye market reach. The further from the center geographically often, but the further from, it doesn't always have to be geographically, it could also be further from its direct relevance, the harder it is to get students to enroll or to fill out lead forms or to consider a program. So we use brand and popularity factors to determine the potential for the different schools we work with. And this affects things like enrollment goals. It affects trends we expect to have related to traffic, what lead conversions we're going to have, and then enrollment behavior. And we look at those trends and we look at what's happened in the past to determine what kind of brand reach is really possible. And lastly, and most importantly, I think for certain smaller brands is program competition, which makes it very difficult for some smaller or less known brands to compete. So we're going to take another poll. So I'd like you to just put whatever brand, whatever description you think is the best description of your brand strength. So nationally and or globally well recognized, strong brand, nationally or globally well recognized, but not a strong brand value, or not as strong a brand value, locally or regionally well recognized with a strong brand value, or locally or regionally well recognized, but maybe looked at with a lower brand value, or just a not well recognized brand. And if you could, please click on which one of these you think is a best descriptor of your institution. I'm expecting to see 100% nationally, globally well recognized, strong brands. No, it's, we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's take a look at what our results are here. Okay, so a lot of local or regionally well-recognized strong brands. And so that's really important. If we take a look at a large group of the people on this webinar are in that area, it's really important to identify where and how to spend your marketing dollars. It probably doesn't make sense to go willy-nilly globally if you're a locally and regionally known brand. And as online has become more ubiquitous and people are saying, oh, geez, well, now it's online, I can go anywhere in the world. Look at Southern New Hampshire University. Well, Southern New Hampshire University is no longer a locally or regionally well-known brand. It's a national brand, and they've spent a tremendous amount of resource as well as over 2 decades in developing that brand. So it's very hard to move from a local or regional brand to a national brand. What we recommend is taking advantage of the strength that you have.
Great. So now we're going to take a look at what we define as our roadmap for developing a marketing plan and a marketing budget. And this is really going to connect the dots between, we showed you the enrollment funnel calculator, how we utilize that to analyze our data and give us a sense of how prospective students are moving through the funnel. And now this is going to show in a little more detail about how this now connects to what I would call developing the actual budget itself or your actual media plan. So step one, as we talked about a little bit already, is analyzing your data, your historical data, both from a campaign performance perspective and your funnel stats. You can't really utilize that funnel calculator unless you have some data. And that's a question we get all the time. Well, what if I don't have certain data points that I need? And that's completely fine. We of course utilize industry benchmarks on a regular basis on behalf of our clients, and we try to align both, again, the institutional brand and the strength of the program and the type of program to some of those benchmarks in the funnel where there may be gaps in the data. But of course, the more data that you have institutionally, again, based on both your campaign performance, what you've marketed before, what has worked and what hasn't for you, in addition to, again, those funnel statistics, as detailed as you can get, and how aware you are of how students are moving from the funnel, obviously makes your life a lot easier when you do go to utilize a tool like this enrollment funnel calculator that we showed. So again, step two then would be to actually utilize the funnel calculator itself. Use your inputs of those conversion rates and your input, of course, of your enrollment goal to paint a picture of, okay, what should our KPIs be and our lead targets and our enrollment targets be for this particular program? Like, what do we need to be hitting, again, based on what our funnel is telling us for these goals in order to be hitting our enrollment goal? And from there, it's developing a media plan that aligns to that data. So this is where we connect the dots between your campaign data and, again, that funnel calculator and those funnel metrics. Again, this is another area too where you may be testing something new or potentially looking to test out tactics that you haven't done in the past. And again, completely fine, and I would expect you to be doing that. But there are areas there too where you may want to be utilizing some benchmark data to give yourself and paint yourself a picture of, what type of cost per lead or cost per acquisition should we be expecting for paid search or retargeting or social media advertising? What type of engagement rate should we be expecting, as we put our ads into the market? But it is an opportunity there to connect the dots between campaign performance expectations with, again, those KPIs that you've set, through that funnel calculator to then distribute your media dollars. And I'll show on the next slide kind of an example of what that media plan would look like and how this connects. But again, once you have your media plan developed and you're in a place where you feel like it aligns really well, with those KPIs and those goals that you've set, from your funnel metrics, of course, then you launch and you're in market. And from there, it's all about testing and optimizing. In this, digital age that we live in, there's no such thing as a set it and forget it marketing campaign. We are continually, paying attention to campaign data. What are prospective students interacting with? What aren't they? How can we be shifting dollars around to things that are working or performing better or driving more engagement through the enrollment funnel? And again, those are top of funnel metrics, is things like engagement and what type of web traffic are we driving, but also paying close attention to, what marketing dollars are we investing in different channels, and how are those students then, not only getting into the funnel, but how are they moving through the funnel? And again, allocating your dollars to those high efficiency, high value, high ROI marketing campaigns and marketing initiatives. So this next example, as I had just teased out, is what really the ultimate output would be for us as we develop a marketing budget and a campaign. We define this as a media plan or a flight plan. This particular example looks at, again, just data for what we would call a master's in project management degree. These funnel metrics align to that funnel calculator example that we had shown, where we had a total lead goal of 720. And really how we connected the dots then between our funnel metrics to a plan as it's built right here is, again, using some benchmark campaign data for tactics like paid search advertising, contextual display, social media, et cetera, like, cost per lead, engagement metrics, traffic metrics, things that we would expect to drive from these tactics, and then align lead goals to these specific pieces. I would just point out too that, the lead goal here is the one that we're showing that's being tracked and kind of being held accountable as the main KPI, but in any marketing campaign or initiative that we launch, there's obviously a handful of metrics that we'd be looking at. Lead goals, of course, are important. We want to make sure we're driving interest. Web traffic is incredibly important. Of the ads we're putting in market, are people engaging with it? Is it driving high quality traffic to our web pages or our landing pages? And then, of course, I'd mentioned, ultimately, is this driving, enrollment value to us? Like, is it bringing students into the funnel? Is it moving them through the funnel and ultimately resulting in enrollment? So those are all the types of KPIs that we would look at when we build out a media plan like this. But I think this visually does a really good job of laying out, again, how a full fiscal year media plan would look like for a program. It shows the type of dollars we would invest in order to hit this particular lead goal. But again, there would be additional metrics that we would always be tracking in order to give us a full picture of how these different tactics are performing in relation to ultimately to our enrollment goal. So I'm going to just close now with a topic that could probably be another entire webinar in and of itself, but this is about the marketing mix. As you saw in that media plan that we had outlined, there was, I think, 7 or 8 different tactics that we were in market with, or that we recommended going to market with for that MS and project management program. And that's all about marketing mix, and it's really paramount for us as higher education advertisers, in this digital age, to be thinking about how our prospective students are engaging with us potentially in market. And this is a stat we love to use, but on average, we typically see we need about 5 to 7 quote unquote touch points before we can even bring a prospective student into our enrollment funnel or into our decision set to be considering us as an institution or our program. And a touch point is a very loosely defined thing, but it could be any of these things that you see on the screen right now. Within this marketing mix. It could be a visit to your website. It could be seeing a paid search ad. It could be an email. It could be a billboard. It could be, word of mouth even. So touch points are loosely defined, but the point that I'm making here is that we need to be cognizant of the fact that your prospective students are going to be shopping for you in more than one place. And every prospective student also is going to consume media differently. So we need to take that into account and cast as wide of a net as we can to try to get in front of these prospective students, again, knowing that they're going to need to see an ad potentially 3 or 4 or 5 times before they're even ready to say, yes, I'm interested and I'm going to fill out this lead form, or I'm going to start this application, or I'm going to pick up the phone and call your admissions rep. So again, it's a topic that we could talk in much more detail about, but I just want to point out that when you do see that media plan, the reason why we diversify tactics is in order to take this type of information into account. So we're going to take a quick pause and do another poll here. And what we're going to ask here is for you guys to give us some insight into what you really feel like your most effective channel has been for your demand generation. So what that really means is, what we have here is 5 of the most common, I would call, higher ed marketing tactics: social media advertising, paid search advertising, out of home, AKA billboards, bus ads, digital display, prospecting and/or retargeting, or direct mail. Which of these tactics, if you've used them, have you found to be driving the most interest in your school and or program, whether it be from a lead volume standpoint or a web traffic standpoint? All right, let's take a look at our results. So very unsurprising results. We're seeing about 53% of you identified paid search advertising as your most effective, and then a pretty good mix of the other tactics, pretty evenly split between display prospecting, retargeting, social media, still some folks using direct mail, and a few still doing some strong out-of-home advertising as well. So yeah, I'm not surprised at all to see paid search pop up to the top of this list. It is in my opinion, probably the strongest foundation of any marketing plan, both from not only a paid search advertising standpoint, but also taking into account organic search and SEO as well. Probably the most common tactic we utilize across the board for most of our clients. So really interesting to see what you guys identified as.
So we're going to talk a little bit more on impacts on how to be effective with using the enrollment calculator. So one core principle is know yourselves. I would encourage you, you've heard the garbage in, garbage out, but the more honest and accurate you are with your data, and if you're not sure of your data, use less data. Cut to the data that you know and you're confident is accurate. Second, in terms of being humble, is a lot of times I was very glad actually to see the brand the brand descriptions people had, because a lot of times schools overestimate their brand, or certain stakeholders within a school overestimate their brand. Very often, more senior executives at a school overestimate their brand. And the bottom line is, it's a very competitive marketplace today, and being humble about how far and how impactful your brand is really important. And then third, using demonstrated results before you start increasing goal projections. We work with a lot of different schools, and I was working with a school actually last month on putting together a strategy for their unit. And one person said, why is it that provosts and presidents like round numbers that end in a zero? It's always increased by 10%, increased by 20%. It always seems to be 10 or 20%. It's never like 11%. And that's often because a lot of these projections aren't based on previous data. They're based on an aspirational goal or target. And so I would encourage you, as you're making a forecast and needing to budget hard dollars against advertising, to really use actual results before you start setting, increased goal projections based on a desire or a hope. Next is keeping track of your results and making sure you're hygienic with your data. This is something that we see over time when someone has a CRM that they've had for 3 or 4 years, that records can get built up. They become old leads. I sign up as a mystery shopper on a variety of different sites, and I still get emails inviting me to potentially apply in programs that I've put my name in 4 or 5 years ago. And it just brings a smile to my face to think that, oh yeah, now after 4 or 5 years, I have decided this is the time I'm going to take this program, and this is the email that's going to do it for me. So I would encourage you to be hygienic and to do some spring cleaning with your data. I like to make predictions. I'm a big forecaster. I like competition. So within your unit, within your office, have a contest on who can be most accurate, on how many enrollments you get for a given class, or how many leads you get from a certain campaign, or what your conversion percentage is going to be, and see if you can start to develop and calibrate greater acuity in your predictions, and bet a cup of coffee, or something fun, or someone or the winner has to bring in donuts, whatever it is, but make it fun and get people to start making predictions, and then see what happens with their predictions. And then the last part is really about the funnel. So recalibrate your conversion percentages based on the data that you start to collect. Change the percentages to accurately reflect, so you can learn more about your brand. You learn more about your program mix and what would be a good mix. You learn more about what strategies and tactics are actually working. And then, this is a hard one, make hard decisions earlier rather than later. It's better to cut rather than and throw good money after bad. And that's what we suggest with the testing, is that testing is done with a very, as much as possible, minimal consequence, so that you can learn where you're getting a better percentage, and then invest more in something you've identified as having a better percentage. Sarah? Oh, there we go.
So as a follow-up to today's webinar, we're going to invite you all to engage with us. Again, we know we went through some very detailed data on our enrollment calculator and our approach to kind of budget modeling and media planning in a relatively short period of time. But if you'd like to engage with us after the fact and have a complimentary budgeting assessment meeting to talk more about your organization's or your school's goals and how it could align to utilizing this tool that we outlined today, we'll invite you to do that. You'll have a follow-up email from us in the coming day. And if you'd like to take advantage of that with us in the month of June, please do get back in touch via the link that we provide.
So in taking a look at the budget, different roles within the institution have a different view of the budget. And so one of the things as and each of you have your own role inside the university or the college. And so I'd encourage you to think about the different stakeholders and what their view might be for a specific marketing budget. So as program directors or faculty, people who are very content or program oriented, they wouldn't be doing this unless they thought it was a great thing. They may not have an understanding and appreciation of the amount of resource required to generate enrollments. One of the most important concepts is new program launches aren't benchmarked against existing steady state programs because they behave differently. And so it's important to recognize just because you have one program that's doing really well and it's been doing well for 3 years that we're going to launch a second program similar to it but different. It's not necessarily going to have the same benchmarks. For the marketing leads, people that head up a marketing function or marketing managers, I've worked with many marketing managers, and I don't know if you've seen the Geico ad, but they always seem to want more, just more. Nothing specific, just more. And I tease the team here, and it's really important to understand how to connect marketing resource allocation to some kind of return. And so one of the goals for someone who's in a marketing position is to really understand what their unit's business model is and how they can align that marketing budget to that business model. And always use math over emotion, especially if they're going to be communicating to someone, say, for instance, in the financial space, one of the financial officers or a business officer. And then one of my tried and true favorites is what we've always done is not a plan. Many people have, well, we've done this way, and if we stop doing it, what's going to happen? One of my favorites is the 500-page course catalog printed book that some schools still send out or plop down in supermarket lobbies and things like that. For a financial officer, to be open to testing, but to do it with a minimal consequence, to really help maintain that discipline of measurement. I think that really belongs in the financial realm. And then provide guardrails so that people aren't going to go too far off the path. There's no reason to bet the farm on a specific program, and really making sure you have a diverse allocation of your budget. And then for the deans or lead administrator, provide clear communication on the mission. As long as it's mission aligned, it's more important to be mission aligned sometimes than to just make money or to increase enrollments in a specific program. And then base the strategy or plans on how that business model helps you realize that mission. And then encourage, again, about diversity, maintain a broader portfolio rather than have a lot of vulnerability attached to a single or a couple successful programs. And then look and listen for data to support proposals, but enforce discipline on when to cut. One of the things I love to see is when units decide to sunset or end specific programs because they're not yielding enough return. And some guiding principles, some last sort of guiding principles is one, be conservative. Until you have data to support something otherwise, be conservative, to work on getting accurate and clean data and then use the data. I can't tell you the number of times personally, I'll never forget, I was coaching high school soccer. We had, 25 kids on the team. They just came out with a poll about kids drinking in high school. and it basically said that 91% of the kids in that school drank before they graduated. And I immediately did the math to say, okay, well, that leaves 28 or 25 that are on the soccer team. So use the data. The emotions, everyone thinks they have an emotional, connection to the future, and they can predict the future, but it's really important to leverage that data. When possible, use past trends. However, if you're doing something new or different, then don't rely on the past trends. Obviously, it's going to have a different result. And then one of our favorites is test, evaluate, and continue to repeat. New program launches cost more. And then before you start investing in the top of the funnel, which is the most expensive resource, fix your funnel efficiency. Get the funnel working effectively so you have conversion rates that are desirable before you start dumping huge amount of resource into getting traffic to your site. And then something that can be done all the time is involve your stakeholders so they really do understand that you're using a data-driven approach, that you're not just spending money willy-nilly, and that it's difficult potentially to get people to enroll in certain programs. And the more educated they are, the more likely they are to be able to support what you're trying to do. So Sarah?
All right, thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We hope you're able to take away some valuable budgeting insights that aligns with your institution's business model. Following this presentation, we will be emailing out the slides and a link to our lead generation calculator for your own personal use. All right, so now we will jump into the live Q&A for those who can stay. We'll begin just now 15 minutes or so with questions that you've submitted throughout the webinar. So let's get some questions here. And Lee and Chris, I will direct it to you as it seems fit, but otherwise we will just jump in if it pertains to your area. So our first question that comes in is, how do you account for stealth applicants or those that skip the lead phase in your conversion rates for the enrollment calculator? Chris, I think I'll pass that to you, please.
Yes, that's a great question. I think I teased that out a little bit when we showed the example from kind of the first enrollment calculator, funnel calculator we utilized was the most basic, right? It was just 3 conversion metrics we were looking at. But we know stealth applicants or ghost applicants, however we define them, are not a concern, but they're part of your funnel. Like there are folks who are, at the end of the day, don't want to give out their lead information, don't want to raise their hand, don't want emails. They're going to fill out that application when they're ready to do so, and that's fine. They're, of course, just as valuable as a prospective student who fills out a lead form. But that stealth applicant or ghost applicant stat and metric is one that's important, and it's one that we utilize whenever we can in developing a more, again, that second example I showed, that was a more refined enrollment funnel calculator. I would say on average, those we typically use 10, 11, or 12 conversion metrics when we're developing a budget model and a media plan. And ghost or stealth applicants are almost always part of that consideration set. And really by, the more data you have on that audience, the better. So if you know that 10 or 15 or 40% or 50%, of your applicant pool are true stealth applicants, meaning they never, as far as you know, filled out a form or got into your funnel until the applicant stage, that helps your budgeting because you can then plan on your lead volume potentially needing to be a little bit lower. But I would say in that fact, you still want to be paying really close attention to your website traffic because we know that these prospective students are still researching you. They're still going to be interacting with your advertising, your marketing campaigns. They're going to be digesting content on your website. So you can think about other metrics, again, on the front end to see, if my campaigns are still valuable and not driving leads per se, but we can attribute this to, still really strong ROI on applications, developing metrics like through Google Analytics to pay attention to, high quality web traffic that's still being driven.
Great, thank you, Chris. Our next question here is, what if we are not a national brand? How can we compete in popular program areas?
So I'll take that one. Thanks, Sarah. So most schools are a national brand or think they're a national brand even, but are actually more a regional brand. As I mentioned, everyone everyone's brand reach is a bullseye. It just depends on how active people are within different sectors of the bullseye. So one of the things I encourage people to do is to really get back down to what is it that they're known for. So what is it you're known for? What's special about your institution, or what's special about this program in relationship to others who are offering this program? So it could be things like we're offering this online, but we also have a face-to-face offering as well, and you can go back and forth from one to the other. That would be an example of something that would be kind of unique. Another could be, we're really well known in this one subject area, and that's our area of strength. And I was consulting to a very, very well-known university. This was only a few years ago, and they wanted to go out with an online project management program. And there was nothing distinct about that online, program or about project management, because as everyone probably knows, that's a pretty saturated program area. So I would encourage you to do what's special, or stay to things that are special to your institution. That's a key piece. And then also leveraging alumni, leveraging people who've been past students or other influencers, using social channels is another thing you can do to build from your core. But I would encourage you to start with your center of your bullseye, knowing what your messaging is, knowing what's connecting with people, and then building out from there using social and testing with digital channels.
Great, thank you, Lee. Our next question has to do with how to handle phone lead tracking. So this person writes, we have in-person and phone leads coming into a lot of different people around the office, from student workers to individual program managers to the registrar. And therefore that makes tracking these leads that come in, this way very difficult. How would you handle something like that?
So one place to start is what kind of technology do you have supporting that? So this question kind of tees up the idea of using a CRM. A CRM enables you to take notes with every contact and have that record of notes follow that contact from person to person. You can also trigger tasks for escalation or parts of a question that can't be answered by an individual. But just having a CRM doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to work. So the other part of that is making sure you have good business processes in place or workflow in place that ensures that you're not being redundant with how you're handling something, and that you're trying to get people to the ideal person to answer or to handle whatever question or issue that they're having.
Great, thank you, Lee. The next question comes in at, my brand is well known locally, but the college has not captured marketing data and has not established enrollment goals for our programs. This person is new to the university and is starting that process now. So how does what we spoke of today change based on this background?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one I kind of expected to get today, because I'm sure there are organizations and institutions out there, both big and small, who struggle with that data piece. And the short answer of it is you need to establish some benchmarks, some type of industry benchmarks that you can be planning off of. Try to find some benchmarks that align to both, as Lee had pointed out, not only your brand, but also to the brand and the popularity of the programs that you're going to be marketing. Because at the end of the day, you do need to put a flag in the ground and say, okay, we're going to be working off of the assumption that we're utilizing these as our conversion rates or our funnel metrics. And maybe it's only 3 or 4 to begin with, and that's fine. And you just really have to then rely on, your marketing expertise to be able to be confident that you can test and optimize as you go, and be flexible enough in your marketing campaigns to be able to pivot when you need to, and reallocate your dollars to things that are most efficient and driving the highest ROI for your organization. But yes, it's all about, again, starting somewhere. Start somewhere with a benchmark, and then again, be confident in your plan and test and optimize and be nimble.
Another question that we often get related to this is people have a lag in when they actually get data from certain parts of the enrollment funnel. So sometimes the reports are a month late, or they're or even later. And so in that case, from a lagging standpoint, this is where capturing trend data over a period of time can be really helpful, so that you may not know the current behavior, but you know the trends, and then you can make some decisions along those lines.
Okay, and our next question, let's see, what if we don't have access to some of the data within the funnel and there's a significant lack in some of those areas? How do we proceed with this?
Yeah, I think we kind of handled that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yes. All right. Next question. How accurate can you get with your forecasting results? What factors will make this possible?
So, yeah. So the accuracy is over time, if you're keeping track of what's happening in each stage. If you're able to get that full funnel view from when someone first becomes a visitor to the site to when someone actually becomes a student, and be able to address what happens in their journey and know what happens in the experience of a prospective student. When you can map that from beginning to end, and you've been doing that for a period of time, you can get pretty accurate. You can get accurate for steady state quite well. When you want to try and grow, and this is something I say to people, when they have growth goals for a specific program, by definition, you're going to go out and try and get poorer quality visitors and poorer quality leads. That is part of the definition of growth, is expanding your reach into areas where you may not normally go. So at that point, you're going to need to test, and the testing piece is what makes your accuracy possible, is to test segments. So when we do international programs, which is a great example, you can blow your budget really quickly in international marketing. We go to certain regions of the country, specific programs, start to get messaging that works in specific regions, and then expand from there. And that enables you to make more confident decisions about how to spend marketing budget.
All right. At this time, if anyone has any other last-minute questions, we can certainly address them at this time. Otherwise, it looks like we might be wrapping up our Q&A session here.
Yep. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. And Chris and I will be available for questions if you have any questions, or if you'd like to set up a budget calculation meeting. You'll get an email tomorrow letting you know how to do that, with a link on how to do that and access to a budget calculator.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.